This is part 2 of a 3-part video. Part 3 will come out tomorrow, and if you haven't seen part 1, you can go check that video out right now. Please like, comment, subscribe, and hit the bell if you want to see more videos from my channel.
It's like a Tarantino movie. You're something of a beauty.
Following the reception of Pompo the Cinephile since its release has been an interesting experience. There are quite a few camps when it comes to this movie. You'll have a lot of young cinephiles who are drawn to this movie's optimism towards the film industry, a bunch of people who are confused about the general tone of the movie shifting from sentimental to satire, the crowd that highly commends this film for satirizing a lot of the questionable practices of the industry, the camp that has a huge problem with the preachiness of the film, and the majority of people who like it but really don't know what on earth anyone was thinking writing that bank meeting scene. I mean, it is silly, but it's admittedly gotten better with time for me personally, especially considering my business experience under my belt now. And while I perfectly get people who beef with this movie's philosophical moments, at its core, Pompo isn't about that. It's just about following a lovable ensemble of characters make a movie. The point isn't to take away any wow, so this is what film is about feelings. It's just about rooting for these characters to succeed in their respective fields. You really feel for Natalie's aspirations for becoming an amazing actress, Gene's desire to edit and direct his movie is compelling, and Pompo is a bit of a different breed from CEO characters, mainly because she isn't a greedy one. She is wholly supportive of her cast and crew and values their vision. And she values their health too. Heck, when Gene has to be hospitalized, Pompo doesn't make any efforts to bring him back. It's Gene who has to convince her to let him come back to finish editing the film. On top of that, the movie is beautiful, the filmmaking trivia is interesting, and there's zero instances of blind corporate industry glamorization, so that's fun, but the opening song in the English version still sucks.
And there's no time, saying it's always end. I'll be gone and you can see my face and close that open door and go.
My very first anime experience. The Girl Who Leapt Through Time isn't usually considered Hosoda's finest work. It's usually either Wolf Children or The Recent Belle, but it's clear that from the very beginning Hosoda found his direction. He makes simple and sweet stories with light fantastical elements hit hard on an emotional level, and that is especially true here since this is probably the least fantastical of his 6 original films. A girl named Makoto gains time-leaping abilities and uses her powers to get out of the annoying responsibilities and consequences of life. And that is basically the setup of it all. I said it before, but this movie perfectly captures a character who is secretly scared of the future, but compensates for all that with distractions and fun and avoiding problems. But those problems catch up to her as they reveal that her actions are hurting others. So for the rest of the movie, she is trying to use her last few leaps to fix her mistakes as well as help make her friends happy. And then the Deus Ex ending happens, and apparently people have a problem with it, but I think it's handled fine, and it fits in the narrative and the themes, so what gives? The animation is expressive and fun, though it's a little too simplistic, but I'll give that a pass. Makoto herself is a ball of fun and interacts with everyone very well, and the emotional beats are mostly quiet and very effective. I love this movie so much.
Why am I always living these endless crazy days? But it's okay, I am setting off to begin again.
Yeah. This is my favorite Disney movie, and that's crazy because I never grew up with this film, and I'm mad that I didn't because it's genuinely amazing, a near-perfect blend of hilarious slapstick comedy and devastating emotion. Lilo and Stitch is technically 2 movie pitches stitched together. The first pitch about a ruthless alien who ends up on Earth, and the other about 2 sisters, Lilo and Nani, who are trying to work out their living situation after the death of their parents and with the impending doom of their eventual separation. And yet with these 2 wildly different plot lines, there is one thing that brings all of these threads together: Lilo and Stitch's friendship. They're both outcasts and feel like they don't belong, but through their bonds they find joy. Lilo finally finds acceptance, and Stitch finds people who love him for who he is. It's such a profound story that manages to make me weep for the last 30 minutes straight. That's another thing, the dialogue in this film is fantastic, not just in the comedy, but also in the drama and raw emotion. Every dramatic beat in the portrayal of Lilo's family situation, as well as Stitch's insecurities, is genuinely heart-wrenching. I wasn't in a sobbing fit for the last half hour, but I was pretty damn close. The animation is freaking beautiful, and I think it's one of Disney's best animated yet. The voice acting is great all around, and I love that Lilo has become such an icon in the autism community. Sure, I would love to see more Cherry and Violet Evergarden appreciation, but Lilo is still an excellent rep, and I'm glad people see her as such. Lilo and Stitch is just such an amazing masterpiece of a film that I recommend to everyone. Trust me, you will love it to bits. Summer Wars is a movie that is pretty hard to not be entertained by. I said it before, but it is just so much fun, so energetic, and so immersive from beginning to end, which is a miracle given its kind of nonsensical premise. A math expert working as an intern for the worldwide online platform Oz is coerced by the popular girl to pretend to be her boyfriend at her family reunion. And while this typically tropey setup is playing out, a dangerous virus has been unleashed on the internet and is threatening to seize control of every government-operated function, including access to nuclear-level threats, and it's up to the family to save the world. Yeah, it's a very bonkers story on paper, but Hosoda is a fantastic director, so of course the execution makes all the difference. Despite how silly and over-the-top the scenario is, you really feel the panic, the tension, the dread, and the hopelessness of the situation. You grow terrified of what this virus can do because of how fast it can learn and how power-hungry it is. All the more reason to be afraid of the eventual AI takeover, but apparently people are too stupid to realize that. First it comes after artists' jobs and livelihoods, next it's going to access a satellite to hurl it down to a nuclear power plant. But at the same time, it just makes it all the more thrilling to see the characters triumph over this stressful situation. Even when they have their own losses to deal with, they are determined to save the world. And Natsuki may not have a whole lot to her despite being the poster girl, but she has her character moments. And also this movie is really funny, but that's kind of a given because it's a soda and that's all that matters.
And still it takes you ages to see that no one's there. Everyone's gone on without you.
Of course, this wouldn't be a proper Best Animated Movies list without at least one Pixar movie, but obviously this isn't the only one. There's like 2 more. Toy Story 2 isn't a perfect movie, as no movie is perfect, but I do think it perfectly captures what a sequel should be. In the first film, we're introduced to a comprehensive and fun world of toys that provides for a lot of amusing situations, and it has one of the best friendship stories, period. But when you really get down to it, the nature of being toys and how these characters think of themselves isn't explored as much, until the sequel, where Woody is thrown into a situation of existentialism where he has to decide, is it better to be there for Andy until he eventually grows tired of him, or is it better to last forever but never interact with a kid again? Despite all of the fun stuff you get with the other characters, it's a pretty introspective premise, complete with great comedy, a tense finale, and a good twist villain. Though it's still not my favorite Pixar film, and neither is this next one.
Spirit supernatural, I shy, what's all the fuss?
If I was making this list back in 2019, this would be my number 1. This was my favorite animated film for the longest time, and part of that is because I was a crybaby walking out of the theater, but also because I was just in awe of the scale of the movie in terms of animation quality, and the story uses the Dia de los Muertos holiday as a framework for a tale of personal passion, family, and the role death plays in our lives. That even though people are gone, they're never really gone. They live on in our stories, our recollections, and how they've changed us. This recent rewatch, though, was a little slow for me, but that's probably because I watched the movie like 12 times, so I know every little detail about the film. You'd think I'd have that impression on a certain other movie I watched a double-digit number of times, but Nope. Miguel is one of the best kid characters in recent memory, mainly because you believe that he's actually a kid without any hip lingo or annoyingly childish antics. Also, one of the best Pixar protagonists. Hector always steals the show for me with how much fun his physicality and antics are, but also for the emotional depth of his character. There's the music, which is spectacular. Un Poco Loco might be one of my favorite songs under the Disney brand, and one of the better twist villains for good measure. This has been knocked down because I've seen more movies, but it'll always have a special place in my heart.
Oh, when we come home, home is wherever I'm with you. Oh.
Given its premise, it's kind of a miracle that Violet Evergarden the movie is as good as it is. Violet Evergarden is my absolute favorite series of all time, about a discharged, emotionless soldier trying to reintegrate herself back into society by working as a ghostwriter, all while dealing with the disappearance of her major. The series touches on subjects such as war, forgiveness, self-love, and the value of forming relationships with the people around us. And by the end of the series, Violet has developed from a stone-cold killer to arguably the most empathetic and compassionate character in fiction. But similar to what I said in my review and the analysis, Violet casting off her identity as a murderer doesn't mean that she suddenly stops having moments of negative self-talk and imposter syndrome. In other words, just because she no longer hates herself doesn't mean she suddenly loves herself. And after the show and the spin-off film, this movie explores that idea. Whereas the series deals with her finding her true self, the final film largely deals with her trying to love the person she is now. All of that is entwined with one of her last jobs as a scribe and her reunion with her major. Yeah, I won't bother to hide the twist because I honestly think it makes the series a bit more powerful in retrospect. On top of that, the animation is drop dead gorgeous, even for KyoAni. I absolutely love the soundtrack, and the other characters and their interactions are always fun to sit through. I still don't really know what they were getting at with Iris, but it is still a masterpiece.
You ready, arachnophobes? Line up the cast, I'll snap your bones. Crack my knuckles and rap my knuckles and bash your skull and then crack some jokes.
Yeah, you knew this was going to be on the list somewhere. If I had to pick any movie that single-handedly influenced modern animation to a ridiculously high extent, it would be this one. The recent entourage of 2D, 3D hybrid animated films, from Bad Guys, Mitchells, Puss in Boots 2, Belle, Nimona, they all could not have been made without the existence of Spider-Verse. There's not a whole lot I can say about this that hasn't already been said. The comic book style of the animation is gorgeous and spectacular, the action is amazing, I love the energetic humor, and the characters are amazing. Penny is my personal favorite of the bunch, and it bums me that she and the rest of the B team were not in the sequel. I mean, she gets like one line, and they'll definitely have a part in the next movie, but still, I was pretty sad. It's honestly a miracle that a movie this influential and masterful came out of Sony, let alone is a Spider-Man movie. That's like the most mainstream combo for a movie, and it feels like there was zero executive interference. That is honestly magical. Sure, it's not my favorite film from 2018, which we'll get to later, but I love how this movie sparked a new movement in animation, and its influence will always reign over the modern animation industry. As far as biblical media goes, it has a strange reputation. A lot of contemporary Christian media is regarded as highly annoying or borderline problematic and toxic, whereas adaptations of Bible stories are handled better. But fun fact, a lot of the time these movies are directed by pastors, not actual filmmakers, which is why it can have that sort of problematic air. Prince of Egypt is not one of those movies. In fact, it's probably the best religious movie ever made, and the unquestioned best movie from DreamWorks Animation. The Prince of Egypt is an incredibly faithful adaptation of the Moses story. After a whole bunch of Hebrews migrate to Egypt and start living there, the Pharaoh fears that their numbers will pose a threat, so he enslaves all of them and sends his soldiers to kill all the newborns. One of the newborns that escaped that fate, however, is Moses, who is taken in by Pharaoh's daughter. In the story, it's his wife, and is raised as a prince of Egypt alongside his stepbrother Ramses. When they grow older, Moses realizes his heritage and after royally effing up, abandons his brother and exiles himself. Many years later, God calls Moses to free the Hebrews from slavery, and he, alongside his wife Zipporah, set out to demand from Ramses to let his people go. But there is more to this movie than just how respectful it is to the story. The songs are genuinely perfect. There isn't a single musical number that falters, the 10 Plagues song being my personal favorite, obviously, and you really feel the disconnect between Moses and Ramses. Ramses' stubbornness and pride stems from his insecurities of being the weak link, and it's tragic to see the falling out of these brothers unfold. The animation is gorgeous and breathtaking. Every single impressive sequence is done super well. The river turning into blood, the 10 plagues, the Passover, the parting of the Red Sea, come on! I guess there are a few points of contention. Like, Aaron and Miriam are two characters that I always wondered what the point of them were. I mean, for the narrative, they serve their purpose very well, but in terms of the film being an adaptation, their roles served as personal irritants. Thankfully, I don't let that bother me all too much anymore. It's honestly miraculous how accessible this movie is to people of all faiths. It never once talks down to its audience being like, Christianity is the only way to go, bro. Lord knows we don't need that kind of attitude everywhere. It is such a masterpiece of a film that is wholly impactful. I love everything about it.
Wolf, wolf, howls the wolf? Wolf, wolf, run free.
Arguably Mamoru Hosoda's most adored and widely beloved film, and for good reason. Wolf Children follows Hana, who gets together with a wolf man, has 2 kids, and is left to raise them on her own after her loved one passes away. That's really the only fantastical touch this film has. Ame and Yuki can transform into wolves and back into humans spontaneously, and it does provide for some great comedy, but the film also uses the wolf transformations in a much more metaphorical sense. For example, it's easy to associate Yuki's wolf transformation with her boyish and unruly wild side, a side that is stereotypically unexpected for girls. But later on, she realizes her ways of the wilderness keep her from having friends, so to fit in with the other girls, she has to bury her wild tendencies and present herself all feminine with her fancy dress and whatnot. But that manifests into outbursts of rage after spending so much time burying her emotions. It's not that hard to say that this says something about the way we raise our kids, girls especially, as it's very easy to tell them that they need to change who they are to be all ladylike. That's always the most fascinating part of the movie for me personally, but the main story is about Hana's struggles as a mother and her growing tenuous relationship with her children, especially with Ame. Ame grows to be more attached to his wolf side, basically on the road to adulthood, and Hana has to come to terms with the fact that eventually she will have to let her kids go. Throughout the whole movie, though, there's this air of wonder and optimism that just shines through every scene, no matter what is happening. It's a film that brings a wide smile every single time, and I cannot recommend it enough.